The XPeng P7 is easily one of the most influential Chinese electric cars of the last 10 years. And today, we're going to be reviewing a vehicle that XPeng claims is an upgrade on that car in almost every single way, the XPeng P7 Plus.
Welcome to Wheelsboy, where we cover the newest, coolest, and wildest vehicles from the Chinese car market. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Despite rumors to the contrary, the P7 Plus is not a replacement for the XPeng P7, but it does stand on its shoulders in terms of design. The original XPeng P7 was a unique and attractive sedan that helped to show that China was capable of more than just copying foreign brands. It was also hugely important in the domestic market, where its signature front end would go on to influence the design language of a dozen other automakers, perhaps showing that Chinese brands were also willing to copy from each other.
The P7 Plus keeps some of the details of the original P7, including the lightsaber upper LED and the placement and shape of the lower headlights, but changes pretty much everything else. While the original P7 was more of a traditional three-box sedan style with a long front hood as well as a relatively slight slope to the roofline, this one is much more cab forward. That means a shorter overhang here, but a much more dramatic roofline. That indicates the fact that this is a true liftback, and hallelujah for that. Imagine the difference between a Mercedes-Benz S-Class and a Mercedes-Benz EQS.
The P7 Plus also joins the ranks of Chinese cars featuring an ADAS light. That's a light that turns on when the car's driver assistance system is activated, whether it's on the road or when using automatic parking.
The rear design, which I always felt was one of the weaker parts of the P7's design, is also completely restyled. Instead of a simple trunk lid spoiler like the P7, you now have this double-decker look on the P7 Plus. Because the roof is completely blacked out, the effect of this is something like putting a camper top on top of a sedan, or maybe taking the top off of one sedan and putting it onto another sedan. I can't say that it's as clean or simple a design as the original P7, but I do think it looks a little bit more interesting and a little bit more high-tech. That also applies to these wraparound LED taillights.
The funky dual spoiler also helps to achieve a drag coefficient of 0.206, not as low as the recent XPeng Mona M03, but also much better looking.
One of XPeng's biggest talking points for the XPeng P7 Plus is space, which, thanks to that cab-forward design and this lift-back rear opening, there is absolutely plenty of. Behind the second row, you get 725 liters of space, including some storage underneath the floor. That's the equivalent of a two-row Range Rover. If you lay down that second row, you get 2,221 liters. That's only 175 liters less than a Mercedes-Benz GLS if you lay down the third row and the second row. If you watched this video and thought, boy, I'd love to get my hands on an XPeng P7 Plus or any other Chinese car, reach out to us via email at sales@wheelsboy.cn. We can help you to export Chinese vehicles to your country. In theory, at least, the XPeng P7 Plus should serve as the flagship sedan for the XPeng brand, putting it above the P7, but sitting inside, I would say it's kind of hard to tell that that's the case. The material qualities specifically, well, they're not any different than those of the P7. I have to admit there's a ton of soft touch materials all over this interior, on the door, on the dash, on the center console, and it is a very comfortable place to spend time, but the actual quality of those materials doesn't feel any different than the P7 or other XPeng models. The overall interior design, well, there's good and there's bad. The good news is that XPeng may finally have reached a level of maturity as an automaker and a producer of automobiles that they have a unified interior design language, a more simplified design language. Previously, all the XPeng cars' interiors were all kind of very different. It was hard to tell that you were an XPeng going from one car to another. This one feels simplified, feels like something they're going to be repeating in other cars. That might be an influence of Volkswagen, who invested in the brand and I'm certain connected them with some of their suppliers here in China and probably encouraged them to do this kind of thing, to go in this simplified direction. The bad is, it's not especially interesting to look at. In fact, it feels relatively traditional, but maybe that's an indicator of the fact that China's electric vehicle market is also getting more mature, and these brands don't feel the need to create absolutely wackadoo interiors anymore. There's certainly plenty of interior tech on the P7 Plus, and it's presented in a slightly different way than it was with the P7. While the P7 had two connected screens here, they are now independent of each other, as is the current flavor of the day. In front of me is a 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster. You'll note that there's no HUD. That's not available on the P7 or any other XPeng model because He Xiaopeng, the CEO of XPeng, has made it clear they do not like HUDs for whatever reason. Center screen is 15.6 inches, and we'll get back to that in a moment, but I want to talk about up here, which is a 9-inch digital rear view mirror, a necessity considering the fact that you can't really see much out of the back of this thing. Back to that 15.6-inch center screen. It has upgraded hardware. That's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8295P for performance chip, not the standard 8295. Response times and things like the menu are actually not quite as fast as I would expect them to be, but let's be honest, if you're a normal car user, you're not going to be doing this all the time on your menu, so that's not a particularly realistic way to interpret it. When it comes to things like moving around on the map, no problem, and the UI itself is a slightly tweaked version of the one that we've seen in previous cars like the P7, G6, etc., etc. I've always liked the design language for this, mostly because it looks a lot like Tesla's, but hey, there's a reason people use the Tesla UI. It's because it works. Many of the things you would have to pay extra for on the P7 and P7i are now standard on the P7 Plus. That includes, for example, heated, cooled, and massaging seats, front and rear. That was never available on the P7. That also includes a 20-speaker sound system that includes 2 speakers in the headrest that allow you to hear Bluetooth calls as well as prompts from your navigation. Another upgraded area, here on the center console, you no longer have 1 wireless charging pad, but 2 wireless charging pads. Tucked away in the center console is also the standard fragrance system, something we've been seeing on XPengs since the P5 sedan. Let's give that a sniff. Ooh, this one's called Blossom, and it smells fantastic. One of the biggest deficiencies on the XPeng P7 was frankly the comfort of its back seat. The XPeng P7 Plus is an improvement, according to XPeng, and I have to agree with them, in certain areas, if not in others. When it comes to space, legroom is noticeably better than the P7, but headroom, honestly, I can't really feel a major difference between this and the P7. And I have to tell you, my videographer still has nightmares from the time that he had to stay in the backseat of a P7 riding 3 wide with 2 other people for about half of a day. Every time they would go over a speed bump, his head would hit the ceiling of the car. He's not a big guy either, about 5 foot 10 inches or 1.78 meters tall. With that in mind, however, I do think that the rear row of the P7 Plus is noticeably more comfortable than the P7. For starters, as I've already mentioned, you have adjustable rake, as you can see, anywhere from 27 to 37 degrees, which allows you to get a much more comfortable seating position. The seats themselves also feel softer and yet more supportive than they did in the P7. On the back of the passenger seat, you've got this nice fold-down table, which feels quite solid. And on the back of the center console, you have this 8-inch touchscreen, which allows you to control your air conditioning, your seat functions, as I already mentioned, heated, cooled, and massaging as standard here in the second row. You've also control your media, and that includes being able to choose different video apps and play videos here on the back screen, which you can also mirror onto the front screen as well. This center screen being able to play videos, this little screen being able to play videos is, well, it's in the same category as the Tesla Model 3 Highland and the Envo L60, which is to say, I guess it's better than nothing, but it's small and very low, so I can't see myself using it very often to watch a movie or anything. You also have a fold-down center armrest with a kind of interesting design. In front of these 2 cup holders is a little area here that at first looks like you could put your phone in, but actually it's separated into 2 little sections. This is quite convenient. If you wanted to put your phone here, you could then be able to see if you got some notifications or anything. Or if you wanted to flip it over and put it like this, you could have somewhere to put your phone while you charged it using the single USB Type-C charging port. I really wish there was 2. Since I happen to be here in the beautiful city of Guangzhou, I thought it might be worth mentioning that registration for Wheelsboy's guided tour of the 2024 Guangzhou International Auto Show on November 17th is filling up quickly. If you are interested, please reach out to us at tour@wheelsboy.cn and do it quickly because spots are filling up. Before I talk about the driving dynamics of the P7 Plus, I want to give you an important bit of context. The original P7 was one of the first Chinese cars I ever drove that made me think, oh my God, a Chinese brand can actually create a fun-to-drive Chinese electric sedan. I just didn't think it was possible before because nobody had actually done it. The driving dynamics of the P7 weren't, BMW levels, but it had nice direct steering and the suspension felt tight. It just felt like a car that was, had some fun to drive nature to it. When I started looking at the materials for the P7 Plus, however, I realized that I might be in store for something a little bit different. You see, with the P7, all they wanted to emphasize was the 50-50 weight distribution and the handling and the fact that the suspension or parts of it were tuned by a famous German automaker, Porsche. But the P7 Plus was all about its comfort, its low NVH, and the space inside of it. There was very little mention of handling. As it would turn out, there was very good reason for that. It seems as though with the P7 Plus, they're going for a very different driving style than they did with the P7. This is much more of a family sedan, more in line with the XPeng P5 rather than the P7, which is a sports sedan. The suspension is indeed more comfortable than that of the P7, but that means there's a little bit more body roll than the P7. The steering is very light, which makes it nice and maneuverable around parking lots and just easier to drive overall, but it also means that it doesn't feel as direct and as athletic as the P7. The same goes for power levels as well. While the original P7 was available with, or is available because it's still for sale, single rear motor and dual motor variants, this one is only available with single rear motor. Power levels are 180 and 230 kilowatts, or about 240 and 310 horsepower. The 0 to 100 kilometer per hour time on the more powerful version is 5.9 and the slower one is 6.8. These, in the real world, are plenty fast, but I think they're further indicators that this car is not about performance, it's about family comfort. And hey, I'm perfectly fine with that. In the real world, most people don't care as much about driving dynamics as I do. They also don't care as much about being able to go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour faster than you can blink. This is the kind of driving experience that I would guess a majority of mainstream buyers are actually interested in having. And that's probably based on the research that XPeng has done based on the cars that they've sold. I bet they've sold way more rear motor P7s than they have top spec dual motors.
The range and charging stats on the P7 Plus are a major improvement over the P7, but still lag behind some competitors. The two available LFP battery packs measure 60.7 and 76.3 kilowatt hours, with claimed CLTC ranges of 602 and 710 kilometers, respectively. The P7 Plus is more efficient than rivals like the Zeekr 007 or Xiaomi SU7, but those cars offer more outright range thanks to larger packs. Despite using an 800-volt charging architecture, its claimed charging speed of 10 to 80% in 20 minutes doesn't compare to rivals like the 007, which can charge its battery in just 10.5 minutes.
In addition to all the standard features like heated, cooled, and massaging seats, front and rear, and the 20-speaker sound system, this car also features XPeng's latest driver assistance system as standard. That system, unlike the one in previous XPeng models, has no LiDAR units.
Dubbed the AI Hawkeye Visual Solution, which is easily the most ungainly name I've ever heard, the system relies on cameras and radar in order to provide both city and highway NOA without the need for HD maps. This is a major departure from XPeng's previous system, which used cameras as their primary sensor but had 2 LiDAR units on the front bumper for redundancy. Based on the brief experience we had in Guangzhou, the system seems to perform at the same level as the LiDAR-equipped models we've driven before, which is to say it's far from perfect, but still ranks among the best systems available anywhere.
One difference I noticed between this system and the previous generation XPeng systems is the fact that the sensor in the steering wheel is no longer a torque sensor like a Tesla. It's now a touch-sensitive system like a Li Auto or a Neo. That means instead of having to... Thank you for letting me know you're changing lanes. Instead of having to place your hands firmly on the steering wheel, you simply have to take 3 or 4 fingers and touch the steering. Thank you again. It's touch sensitive, like a phone screen. If you told me that the XPeng P7 Plus was a direct replacement for the P7, I would be disappointed because I think it lacks the things that I enjoyed most about the P7. But as a supplement to the P7 within the XPeng lineup, something that's better equipped, more comfortable, and larger, I think it's actually going to be very appealing. Imagine it like your favorite rock band putting out a country album. Sure, it's not what you want to hear, but you can't deny the fact that the general audience might like it.